do it straight away. We have the Dolphins first up. I'll bring up a slide. So again, guys, we'll just have some questions up there just to sort of keep us on track with things. And it's pretty much questions that will be answered throughout this chat. But if we do miss anything, these are things that has been sent through the page and things like that. So if we haven't answered it by the end of the Dolphins part of the podcast, we will answer those questions. So first up, the hookers, we will go with Jeremy Marshall King, 639K. Now, I guess he comes into the discussion when people talk about not having Harry Grant as probably the next best option. A lot of people are trying to say anyway. Where are you at with Jeremy Marshall King? Obviously, he had a really great start last year. He was one of the players to have in Supercoach there. And then he kind of, obviously injury, running the like, sort of went down a little bit. And I think that's why his price where he is. I definitely think there's money to be made. I'm unsure how to play Jeremy Marshall King.
Yeah, he had a really good year last year for the Dolphins and obviously had that injury. And obviously Marshall King's been around for a little while now, but coming from the Dogs, you can't really expect a great deal, but he was very, very impressive last season. And I think where his value comes in at 639 as far as hookers go, he's just shy of Grant. He's the second highest rated one there. And to be fair, it's valid. I see his ownership at 13%. It's quite high. Considering, you know what I mean? Considering what you've got at the top to what you've got in the 500s, I'm almost in the mindset of just get Grant if you're going that high up for your hooker, or just save a bit going down. So there's a lot of factors when we'll get into the fins when you're just thinking about the draw, the buys, his run as well, and the introduction of Graham too towards the back end where he got injured and he started rotating. I don't see Graham disappearing anymore. I have to check whether or not Marshall King had a solid 80-minute roll up until he got that injury, but I feel like it was. I feel like he was just doing 80s pretty consistently, and then obviously things started to dip off for him. But I don't mind. I really do like Marshall King, and it's just one of those things. I think it's a bit early for him. I'd be more than hot to get on Marshall King at some point, but at the moment, I just think he's in that sort of in the middle where I'd either spend up big and go Grant and forget about it, or I just spend a bit cheaper because I don't really see him as the set and forget type. But it just depends. He could probably go up in value and he could probably go up in average compared to what he did last year. But I think the minute sharing is a bit more of a rotation for him, which he may not have encountered as much last season. So probably just to watch, I would think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'll run through the first 5 games for the Dolphins because I remember last week I kept forgetting it and I almost did this week as well. The Cowboys, round 1. Round 2 is the Dragons. Then the bye round 3, which does come at a very awkward time for Supercoach players. It's not ideal when there's a few players here to look at. Round 4, the Gold Coast Titans, and round 5, the West Tigers. So it's a great draw. Apart from that buy for a Supercoach, for an NRL point of view, it's a brilliant draw because it's 2 points right there, and then maybe some other 2 points coming with those teams. But that buy is very painful. We might as well get it out because it is one of the questions. Yeah. How much do you look into that? Is that something that could persuade or should persuade you looking at a Dolphins player early?
Oh, it can, it has a bit too. And to be honest with you, man, we'll go through this team. I'm so hot on a few of these Dolphins players. Hey, there's so many really good value picks for them. And you don't want to overstack your team because come round 3, you lose them all. It's not an issue if you've got depth. That's end of story for that one, really. I wouldn't be going, don't get any Dolphins because they have an early buy. It's more so just be aware of the buy and if you can cover your losses for it because Marshall King's a great option. You've got some of the best players in center wing realistically at the moment that you're probably going to be putting through the Dolphins, and then even their front rowers, they're just everywhere. You've got value everywhere for this team. It's so good, but you just need that coverage, man. That's all it is. Because if you overstack them, and to be fair, they have got pretty good value points increase wise. I think you're probably going to get a cash generation out of nearly all of them realistically. Yeah. Depending on who they are, but if you're getting them in and if you're stacking one position with them, you're not going to have the depth regardless. So if you're getting a couple of the center wings in with Bostock or Azarko or Herbie, and they're all gone at the same time, that's when you have an issue. But if you get one, like it's one player, you got to buy. Probably going to come across a buy every week, and it's not going to be that big of an issue. But just stacking them, I feel like is going to be detriment. But yeah, it's an early buy. At the end of the day, too, it is early enough where you can kind of just go, oh, it's early in the season. I can kind of get past it, but you don't want to get too far left behind with it. So
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying, and with the season as a whole, and every team gets the buys and stuff. These days, it's sort of it's not ideal, I guess, from a cash point. Like everyone loves that after that round three, that the cash starts to flow a little bit, and the Dolphins players like to wait an additional week for that to happen. But um, it is what it is. I think, as you said, like if you're going to start some of these Dolphins players, they're going to be players you're not looking at ideally getting rid of straight away anyway. They're going to be
yeah,
cash flowing with them for quite some time. So you ride the wave. The other hookers, which I don't think at the moment are too much of a sort of a get yet or an option. Ray Stone got the dual second row forward and hooker, probably waiting for a injury to come. So he's playing a lot more minutes to be worthy of. He's about 421K at the moment. So
it's
1%
too much.
ownership. Yeah, I'm not
That's
too sure
surprising at
there.
one. Yeah,
Yeah,
even
one.
1%
Oh,
ownership
I thought one
surprising
was
there.
too
I don't
many.
understand. Who's putting who's putting Ray Stone in your team with 1% ownership at 420K? Like he's so
If
expensive
you are that
for
person and you listen
either
to us, can
position.
you please message a page and just let us know your, or
Why?
people, I should say, why? Yeah,
There's a few in
just
there. For a
just let us
1%, you'd
know.
have to think there's a few there, so
Not
that's a bit of a
judging. We just
blowout.
want to know your. We
No, I'm
just want to hear your
curious.
thoughts about it. Harrison Graham got a taste of first grade last year. 6 matches, 0%, 349K. I don't think he's an option either. And Kurt Donahue, great young talent coming through. 7 games last year. One to look for if Jeremy Marshall King does get injured, because I think he might be next in line for that spot. So if there is, touch wood, hopefully there's not. We say it every week, but if there is a long-term injury or something early on from Jeremy Marshall King, I'm telling you what, Donahue does look quite tempting, even to get a quick cash out of some Jaden Braley and go to that. So the front row forwards, there is one who's a massive, it's quite a sizable percentage. We'll get to him. Start at the top. Jared Wallace, 563K, 0% ownership. Not a temptation for me at all. Yourself?
No, not at that price. Like
No.
you saw what he did at the back end of last season too, man. He was phenomenal. So there was a good amount of like 90s and 80s in there, enough to pique interest. But obviously he's priced accordingly now. So I think as far as it goes, he's probably going to come off the bench.
Yeah.
He tends to do that anyway, and it doesn't really seem to hinder him too much. But can string together some good minutes too off the bench, and he's done quite well with it. So just 560 for a front rower with too many clouds over it. It's just not worth it. But I reckon potentially down the line, just depending what happens with the forwards there, if he can just get back to form and he comes back at a good price, and you just got to sort of time it really well with him. I think it's very, very much just to see what happens potentially down the year. But good player, and he can do it. But for now, I don't think that's a very good option. 0% for a reason. So
Yep, no, I agree. Next two in line, Kenny Bromwich and Mark Nichols, basically around the same sort of price, that 480K mark. 1% for Kenny. Again, that 1%, please message the page. I'm not too sure the thinking behind that one. And Mark Nichols is 0%. The next one, let's talk. Tom
yeah,
Flegler. I did put a post out on the page, I think, this morning about this one as well. And I've got him down as a must-have, which I know talking to it with you, we'll probably have a bit of a discussion about this one. You're not as high on Flegler. You can definitely understand the play, but I think you have him in the must-have category. I do, just purely from the price tag, and I think in the minutes he will play, he will. He had an average last year of 46.6. I see that going up at least 10 points. So that's the reason I have him in the must-have
yeah,
category, if not maybe a little bit more as well. We know the motor he has on him, and looking at the options for the Dolphins, yeah, they've got some okay options, but they've got a lot of older players as well who won't go the minutes that Flegler can. So that could be something that Wayne Bennett likes to use at his disposal. So Thomas Flegler, 475K, a must have for mine. And I'd go as far as saying he's in my top two props to start as well.
I see the appeal for him definitely. I can't really call any front row a must have, to be honest with you. It's
Mm.
one of those positions where you kind of just, a lot of people will do a very similar job, and I'm just like you're just expecting a bigger role out of him. That's kind of where his upside will be. Just depend on what the role he has, because it wasn't like he had a small role at the Broncos. You know what I mean? Like obviously he played Haas, and there was Carrigan there too that had such a big impact on the team. But it wasn't like Flegler was just in there just chipping away and doing stuff. Like he still did a fair bit of work. And it's not a super coach friendly role. So um, I still think he's got that 10 point of value to him, which could push him up to the high 500s, close to 600 potentially too, which is really good value. Um, I'm still on the fence about starting with him or not though, because for the same point that I made, a few minutes ago about having too many Dolphins players, there is a couple Dolphins guys in there that I am definitely keen on and potentially interested in just chucking in the team and running with them to begin with. And I don't want to get caught up having 3, 4, 5 Dolphins players. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's just going to catch me out too quickly. Mainly about that early buy, and even just about the team in general. You know what I mean? When you sort of overdo that position with one team, um, and they do bad, you feel it everywhere. So um, there is a couple of mid 400Ks that are pretty good. He's probably the dearest out of the cheaper bracket of front rowers, considering who I've been looking around at. But like I see the value. You know what I mean? 20% ownership is valid for that reason. So um, he might end up in the team, but at the moment I haven't really played with the idea of it too much. So um,
Mm.
he's just gonna have to put more effort in, I suppose. Like you're just gonna have to play more minutes, or his effort's always been really good. You know what I mean? Like I can't see him really. Like, do you see him pushing it into another gear when he gets to the Dolphins that he couldn't do at the Broncos? Or is it maybe more of
Depends how
like
many
the limelight's
bananas
a
they
bit?
feed him.
Yeah, maybe. I suppose the limelight's going to be a bit more on him now as opposed to Haas Carrigan every single play. So, because he will be their main prop. Like, there's no doubt about
Oh yeah.
his position coming in and just being the general for them all. So, for that, I see natural points increase, but by how much is the question really. So because he played 19 games, 46 average. Um, just having a look, like there was a couple, the two last games, the very very late ones, were his two best games of the whole year, and that was 78 points and 79 points. So barring one other game around 17 where he scored 71, everything else was below 50 really. So like even still, if he gets a 50 average, that's 20, 30K increase. It's not enough to be considered a cash option. It's just, he's just going to chip away and get you that 50. And that's never a bad thing for a prop anyway, especially not when you're paying 600K for him and you're not losing any coin. You're either just going to get a bit or he's going to do what you're paying him for. And it's not a bad run. So that's kind of why I don't have him in the must have. You know what I mean? Like if he was 380, far out, guaranteed, you got to throw him in there. But yeah, closer to that 500, I think he's just going to get what he's priced at, maybe a bit more in those games here
The
and there.
interesting
So
thing, I look at the stats here as well on the Supercoach app, and the pick starting slash the bench, which we can now have access to. So far, of those that have that 20%, 85% are actually starting with him.
mm,
15% are on the bench with him. So I think those that are picking Flegler are picking him as one of their big dog props, one of those top two, as I was saying. So I'm guessing it's probably a partnership
yeah,
with majority would have him with probably Payne Haas.
yeah,
And as you said, they're probably just looking at that stock standard 50, maybe 55, if they can get him up to that. And probably quite happy with that because, as you said, there's going to be a lot of props, but I guess just a balance of your squad as well. Like you want to be able to, and we've spoken about this in the past, even when we did speak about Payne Haas to a certain extent, is early on, what do you want to do? Would you want to pay up a bit bigger on your forwards, or leave that money to get your maybe a second better fullback, or a
mm,
second better, or a Cleary in as your second halfback? So you just got to balance it up, and I think that's a big thing we've got to say this year. And one thing that I've learned as well over the time, because I used to be a very social Supercoach player until the last year or two, where I started to take it a lot more seriously, and I never used to think about that sort of stuff. I used to think, as you said, Flegler, like, yep, perfect, better role, things like that. But now, like some of the points you just made to me, I'm already thinking, hang on, do I hang on, do I have him in the must-have category anymore? Because maybe there's someone else who's even 100K cheaper, maybe 150K cheaper, that could be getting the same sort of points, especially early on. Like maybe a
Yeah.
Samuel Hughes. We've got some injury concerns
Well,
at the Dogs. He could easily, for
that's
mine, early on, could get a 50 point just from base because that Dogs pack will need him to do some work. So that's a big thing to look out for.
yeah, and that's kind of it really, man, because if he had the consistent, oh, it doesn't even need to be consistent, but if he could pump out a 75, 80 score every 5 weeks, but then continue to chip away mid 40s, 50s, you'll take that because he has that sort of thing. But he only did it a couple of games last year, and they were literally the last two games of the year. So you can sort of discount that because people will be getting rested, towards finals and whatever's going on. He might get a bit more of a run. And they're trying to get some younger guys in. So um, yeah, I just don't see I don't see upside immediately for him. But I feel like you could probably get that sort of points output. You could be completely wrong. He could go out there and play 60 plus and average a point a minute, which is going to be really good for his price. But I feel like you're probably going to be able to get very similar scores to him for someone who's 400K, or 430, 450. The Dogs guys in general too. You mentioned them. Um, Liam Knight's 330.
Mm.
I can't imagine Liam Knight's going to do what Flegler can do, but if he gets a solid minute run in that prop position because Sutton's gone, there's a very good chance that he could score a 50. You know what I mean? And that's really good value for the same points. So you're buying points. You know what I mean? You're not buying the player. So yeah, it's just I'm still not off him though. You know what I mean? Like I still think he's a really good pick.
Oh, yeah.
It just depends. And at that sort of ownership percentage too that you mentioned, 15% on the bench is a lot of money to be putting into your props if you're spending 475K and he's on the bench there. Like who are you starting with? And what does the rest of your
Yeah.
team look like if that's the case? Because
You're starting Flegler or you're not naming him for mine. You don't need to put that
exactly,
on the
yeah.
bench.
And I'm
That's
even
silly.
yeah, I'm sort of going against what I said the other week too about like starting with Haas, you know what I mean? I've never not done it, but I'm starting to understand a
Oh,
bit more of
okay.
just seeing that value, you know what I mean? 750K for a 75 point, where 750K in another position, a fullback, it's almost Latrell. You're going to get hundreds and hundreds, and that's the thing. So it's just the discussion about like how much is a drop compared to what you can get in another position. And I'm starting to swing my teams around a little bit more to like, the 400, 500 prop bracket to start with, and then really boost the value outside of that. For the
Breaking
start
news.
anyway.
Breaking news. Jesse set to part ways with Payne Haas, which from a Supercoach point of view, I didn't think I'd ever have that headline out for League of Inches. So be prepared for a
We're
post,
not there
guys.
yet. We're not there yet. But
But even the
it
thought about it, media would run
yeah.
with that. That's all they need, a sniff.
Oh, of
That's all
course,
I
man.
need
I've
right
said
now, a
it. That's
sniff.
it.
I'm
Oh,
running
Buzz is
out
going to
with
be
it.
all over me now. Far out. But you just think about like between Flegler and Haas, you know what I mean? What if you've got 4, 5, 6? That's 300K between the two of them, or just under, obviously 750 to 475. So um, that's a lot of coin, man. That's a
Mm.
lot of coin to find if you don't have it. And then you start talking like I downgrade my premium second rowers into a mid-range second rower. But it's like there's actual points there to be made, more so than you're going to get out of those front rowers. So that's where you can go. Even if you went Flegler's my main starting prop at 475, I don't even think that's really a bad idea as
I
far as
was
it
about
runs
to
at the
ask you that
moment.
question.
Yeah, I don't
Is
think that's really too
downgrading
bad.
Haas to Flegler as your main guy a bad shot? Because that would free up almost 300K. And as you
Yeah,
said, that would let you do quite some things to really project that ceiling for your team early on with, as you said, those for mine to start with at the moment. I don't actually have a second gun fullback yet, and that makes me nervous because every single year I've played Supercoach, whether it was seriously or not, I've always had the double gun fullback.
yeah,
And this is so far the first year where I'm taking a lot more seriously, and I haven't got that. It's actually starting to make me
mm,
nervous, and
yeah,
I'm starting to think the same because yeah, I'd love that sound of that 70 point each week from Payne Haas. I know he's going to be good to start with, but good and starting well for other players in other positions is a lot more points than the 70 odd. So
yeah. That's
do
kind of
I
where
take the hit?
that's my mindset at the moment, dude. So
Because we're
just
also because we are talking with Flegler, and the last thing with Flegler is we have said some of the points to make you maybe say he's only going to average 50 or maybe 55, but there is also a lot of points for him. Maybe he can average 60, 65. We don't know yet, just because we don't know
yeah,
about
well,
the role. Like
of
if he's the
course,
main guy there, he's going to have Gilbert doing a lot of the hard work around the ruck, a lot of the defensive work, which should free up Flegler a bit more to be a bit more attacking. Where last year and the years before at the Broncos, he hasn't been called upon to be that guy because it had Payne Haas. The Dolphins don't have Payne Haas. The Dolphins
no,
don't have a forward pack that can do that sort of work. Flegler is their man to be their Payne Haas. So if he becomes that sort of figure, then he looks like an absolute steal at 470K. And after round 3, when they after their bye, we're probably telling everyone if you don't have Flegler yet, you must get on him this week. Like you just have to do it.
mm,
So definitely, it's one of those wait and sees. But as you said, like it's just about like that first couple of weeks balancing out what you want to do in terms of points, and it's looking more and more likely, as you said, for me as well. I don't think I'll start with Haas. Is Flegler going to be my main prop guy? That's my next question.
yeah.
So
Well, at 475, you can kind of justify it. But again, like that's the point. If he just did 50s and the occasional 70, 80 last year at the Broncos with, you can call it a reduced role compared to what he'll have at the Dolphins. If that's what he'll do as a baseline, he can only go up because he'll just
yeah,
be playing more and he'll naturally be doing more. So, if you can look at this previous year and go, okay, cool, he did this, and I'm happy with just getting that at the very least, there is only upside for you. So,
yeah. No, I
um,
agree.
yeah,
Jesse Bromwich for mine isn't a Supercoach option this year, and I don't actually. I think he'll get some less minutes this year, especially now with Flegler, as we've just spoken about there, and you got Jared Wallace there, and you got the next man I want to have a little quick chat about, Josh Kerr,
mm,
349K. He's got the dual second row and front row forward, 1% ownership so far. Now, this isn't actually one that I'm going to say I'm going to question that 1% because one thing I will say on Josh Kerr is last year was a tough year for him. He was never the player that he was looking like he could have been the year before that at the Dragons, and he was having a great year. That I think it was in 2022. Was a really good year for Josh Kerr, and this is a sneaky signing last year. When they first got him, I was like, "Oh, it's good for Josh Kerr to get away." Now he's got a full preseason at the Dolphins, and he'll join that bench rotation. It's just a question about minutes, what minutes he will get. Personally, I'm not starting with him. I will say that now. But it's someone that I will be keeping an eye on. I'll say that now. I'll keep an eye on him and his minutes because, again, if Bromwich, if Wallace or something gets injured and a long term injury, I think Josh Kerr gets minutes increased and could become a sneaky little option for a bit of a cash grab or the like. So not starting, but I can definitely see some upside with Josh Kerr as the season goes on.
yeah. I remember looking very, very early days when the app sort of come back out and reset, and you could have a team play with it. That he was at there, and he was priced in the 350s and dual as well, which is very handy. Um, he just needs the minutes, man. I think he might actually do quite well in that team, just depending on how he runs. Because last season, his points per minute were roughly around like 1.3 on average throughout the whole season. Only really
Wow.
playing those 20, 30-minute roles off the bench. So impact's a bit different to starting and getting a consistent run of that stretch of points during the game. But um, you know, 350 isn't too bad if he can get himself a run. And I think by the time you're waiting it out and he might get a run if someone goes down, there's a good chance that he probably goes down in price if they've got that many forwards to rotate through and he's only getting 15, 20 minutes here and there. Like sometimes actually you might even want that to happen. You might even want him to just take a bit of a dip so that he becomes more appealing for you. And realistically, man, these guys are pretty old out there. Basically, all of them
Yeah.
are. They're all aging, not very gracefully, to be fair. But there's a good shout that he can get a starting position at some point in the year. And I think when that happens, if he's around the same price or maybe even lower, it's definitely appealing.
Yeah. No,
Even just
I
as
agree.
someone to sell and cash down into anyone, like that's kind of where you would be doing it. I don't think you go there chasing
Yeah.
him. I think you just sort of cash out of someone for him. So
Yeah. No, I agree. Second row forward time. there's not too much to talk about with this one actually for their positions. I'm keen to get into some of the other positions that got coming, but just quickly, Tom Gilbert, the top two are probably the two most likely candidates, I think, for this side. And 602K, 59 average last year, 2% ownership, only played the 11 matches. I feel like for a rugby league point of view, that's when the Dolphins really fell away with their season. Coincidentally, when Tom Gilbert got injured, I think he was the heart and soul of that team. Really led from the front, and as I said, could have easily, for mine, could be a leader or the captain of that side in the next couple of years. I can't pay 600K for my second row of Tom Gilbert, knowing that there's not a lot of the top high stats that we can get from him. He's just going to be a standard, probably that 59-60 player each week, which isn't bad. But when I can get that from some of those cheaper second row options, which we've already spoken about and we'll speak about for more teams, I'm not going to entertain him at the moment. And the same sort of with Lemuelu will be the same, 554K, 0% ownership after his year last year, I think, because he hasn't got the dual anymore. He doesn't have that center wing,
That's exactly
which
it.
hurts him. But what's your thoughts on those, the top two, which I think are the only real two to talk about when it comes to the second row options for the Dolphins?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tom Gilbert. You know what I mean? Like you saw what the Dolphins did with him last year, and he was just a freaking monster for him.
Huge.
And he had a few big games too. I think he got, almost tonned up a couple of times. So he did it once and then he got close twice. So it's pretty impressive, really, for Tom Gilbert. You know what I mean? You wouldn't really put him in the discussion. So um just unfortunately missed half the season, man. That was the problem. I think it hurt the Dolphins big time as well. So um they start off against the Cowboys. I'm sure he'd like to smack them again because he scored 106 points against them last time. So it might not be a sneak. Like that's a pretty good play, really. I don't mind it, but again, 600 is a lot. When you look at that mid-tier bracket that everyone's raving on about, there's too many options there to spend 600 on him, where you can go up a smidge more, and the doors open up a lot. So it'll be definitely a cheeky pod play or a draft pick. I like both of them, but yeah, 600's it's sort of on the fence. I really wish he had dual, man. If he had a dual, I'd be thinking about something potentially, but he has no reason to have it because we made that lock discussion. Why they're all second rowers. And then Lemuelu's lost his. Hey,
No one's got back to me about that. So if you do have an answer, please message the page League of Inches on any social media. If you can find us on any of it, message me, let me know, because it has literally, I've been scratching on my head still this week about that, because it does not make sense that locks are second row forwards. They are more of a front row forward than a second
yeah,
row. So
you need
please,
to write someone a letter, mate, and send it to Supercoach
I am.
headquarters. Yeah.
Mr. Supercoach, not
Yeah.
happy. Mr. Sengster out there, I know you listening, mate. Get back to me. Let me know. Thank you.
Yeah, surely there's a reason. Lemuelu lost his appeal when he became 550K and lost center. So um, that's basically it there. Not really too much to dive
Yeah.
into too much. It's just, he was very fun for the out of position play, but that was kind of it. I didn't really see anyone playing him at second row last year. They were just plugging him in at the center wing spot. So rolling down the line, man, it's not a lot to look at all, really, is there?
No, there's not.
Very thin position for
I
the
reckon just
Dolphins.
quickly, just fast forward into the playmakers, which I was actually just wanting to skim over quickly, but I look upon their stats and every single playmaker bar Max Plath, which is almost a bottom dollar 5/8 for him, has at least 1% ownership, which I'm actually thinking, I'm like, hang on a second. I was expecting to see 0% for pretty much every player here. So Sullivan, 461K halfback. Anthony Milford got the dual 5/8 halfback, 328K, both at 1%. Nicarima, 592K. I remember last year, some parts of the season, he was actually not a bad shout, playing some decent footy, 1% ownership. Isaiah Katoa, after a slow sort of start to his NRL career, looking to probably go to that next step this year at 374K. That's probably the only reason I can see that people are on it, which is at 2% at the moment, his ownership. They're just hoping for that upside and for him to go to another level in his second year. When I group all those together, I know I'm a bit shocked by that. I'm shocked that there were actually percentages on these players.
I see I feel like, you could probably have a bit more percentage on Sean O'Sullivan. Um, I wouldn't be surprised to see that number go up closer to the day, but Milford definitely not. Katoa, I had him all year last year because of how cheap he was, and his position it seemed seemingly nailed last year. So I don't see him losing that, but I don't see any upside. I didn't see any of it last season, and there wasn't really much to look forward to there. But I feel like O'Sullivan could be a decent one, man. I really do.
Mm.
Obviously, he started off quite well. He scored a 59, then a 41, and a 54. So, if you're just going off that alone, there's two scores over 50 something. So there's his value straight off the bat. And then he got that, I think it was a pec injury. And was it pec? It was something. It took him out for a long chunk.
Yeah.
Um, and then he come back, and then it was pretty much straight into it, man. You got a 60 here and there. He got a few high 70s and almost in the 80s. So there was a lot of up, down, up, down, up, down. And I think as far as like a price point goes, 460 is fine for it. Especially if you just want to run with like a Hines and a cheaper option, but not someone who's so cheap that they're not playable.
Yeah.
I feel like O'Sullivan comes in at that price point where it's like you'd be happy to play him if you needed to. I mentioned it to you as well. If you're going to run that combo, potentially, we'll say Hines O'Sullivan, the Hines buy in round 6, like the Dolphins play the Tigers, and I'd be more than happy to play O'Sullivan that week. So little things like that, where you just want to plug that hole and occasionally play them where you need to, you just sort of have to see, providing everything goes well and you don't have to put a fire out and trade someone before then, you have to look at who's covering that position at what time. Because, if it was this guy's got a bye, but the guy that I'm filling in is playing the Panthers, like you may as well just play your guy for nothing because you're almost going to get that out of him anyway. So I feel like, at 450, he could potentially be a 600, 650K half towards the back end of the season if he just gets that stretch of games done because, you're going to get the 70s, you're going to get 80s. Shit, I think he might turn up at once or twice throughout the year as well. But you'll just get those lower games. And, I can't complain at 450 for that, considering he's not going to be your play every week. But there is value there for him for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, 1%
And when I
ownership's
say I
very
was
low.
shocked,
Yeah.
just to show everyone I'm a Supercoach whiz, I was shocked because it was so low. I knew this was going to be said, and I knew he was a play, so it should be up about 10%, guys. It's just
Yeah.
honestly 1%. Go, guys, go back and get on him. Get on the O'Sullivan train. I love the signing. I'm going to do it myself.
Oh yeah,
Cleary's out.
yeah.
O'Sullivan's
Look,
in.
man, that's 500K.
Don't tempt me. Come on. Don't.
That's
Oh, let's
five.
no.
That's
Don't put
that's
it
nearly
into.
500K. Honestly, that's a lot of coin, dude. You put someone in there who you're like, okay, like it's Cleary too. You can't make that comparison. They're completely different. But that's a astronomical amount of coin you got to play with. And just doing that alone, like I feel like, if you get a 70 out of O'Sullivan at 450, you're going to be wrapped. It's going to be the best thing ever. Where a 70 out of, someone you spent almost $1 million on is going to gut you right down. So, and it could put you in a position too where you've gone from having 4 mid-range center wings to having some quite decent scorers or even 2 guns and running the other 2. And then that difference of, 30, 40 points, you've already made it up at center with that extra 500K. So it's just something to consider too. For the cheaper options in half, I feel like he's probably one of the best ones. But
He's better than Caesar. I'll give you that. So.
Oh, guaranteed, 100%. And Caesar will kick too. So he's not like obviously Azarko kicks there. So I just think just the Dolphins have a bit more of a prospect about him. So
he's even more of a play if Asako does get injured, because he'll then take on the goal kicking. So that could be huge. I think if there was a week where, say, Osaka, as I say again, touch wood, we don't want it to happen, but if there was a week where Osaka went down and he's down for a bit, I reckon if we looked at the stats, O'Sullivan's ownership would increase that next week because I reckon a lot of people would start to look at that and get on. So talking about Osako, he's leading the center wing. He's at 783K. He is one of the big dogs this year, not just in the center wing, but in Supercoach, one of the elite players. And you 9% ownership. So there's still a lot of players out there that believe. Are you jumping on to start with? Let me just quickly hang on a second. Picked starting it against the bench. I love this little stat now that I've discovered this one. 98% are picking him to start there is 2% of you out there. Now, they're probably just the ones that have done your team and gone, I'll fix it up later on. That's fair enough. But 2%, if you're putting that on your bench, go and
God
get some
damn.
pills because
I want to see that. I want to see it.
send
Nah,
your teams through. But obviously, you haven't just got your lineup set yet. But
nah.
Asako, personally, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah.
He had a season of all seasons last year, and if anything, I'm predicting to go down a bit. And then the temptation comes, but yeah, I can't.
Too much for you?
Too much. 78, 783. I
Yeah.
think 9% ownership is too much, especially early on with the, as you said, freeing up cash. I was expecting that when I just looked at it then to be about the 4-5%.
Um. Okay. So we'll make this comparison. You get Payne Haas for 750, and then you grab any 400k center wing. Say someone 450. I don't know who's in the 450s, but pick one of them. Would you prefer that than having Flegler, for example, and a Zarko as an opposite play? Because that's where your coin's spent.
Oh, I'm a bit nervous, to be honest, with Asako, and there's another reason why. And I guess we will talk about it. That's what we're here to do.
Is
I'm
it
worried
Herbie?
about the farm work. Yeah, I'm worried about Herbie coming in, being the main guy there. And then obviously after the Hammers year last year, obviously last year was the Hammer and Asako. They were their two guys in the back line. But now that they've got Farnworth and they've got Avarillo, I think a lot of people are
Gavrilo
forgetting
too.
Avarillo. I think Avarillo is going to be an absolute gun this year. There is a lot more options to go to now for the Dolphins that I predict quite a few tries to be scored at center, where last year it was always passed off to the wingers to score in the corner, and Asako fed off that. I don't see that happening as much this year, if I'm being honest with it. I think Asako will still have his work rate by his base points and the like. I think he'll still get some tries. Don't get me wrong about that. I'm just worried with the 2-star center signings coming in that some of those tries won't be there.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, man. They had a lot less talent to work with last year, and it kind of made him shine out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And again, man, like it wasn't like Azarko's been doing this every year too. It was this one year that he just exploded and just, was incredible because he started the season last year at 383k. That's insane. It's so cheap considering what he's come out at
Yeah.
now, but yeah, it's wild, isn't it? And then he
Only
ended
been on
as
that.
the
Oh,
yeah, yeah, pretty much was as soon as you could. But I do expect a bit of a dip there, but it just depends, man. It really depends his role there because it looks like he's going to be that guy, and he scored nearly 100 points so many times last season. So you can't expect that to just disappear out of nowhere. But again, the love has to be shared around a little bit more. Hobie's going to be playing inside him, I'm pretty sure.
yeah.
And he's not going to want to give it all away himself. Like he's got a point to prove too. He's going to a new club, and he's gone there as a bit of a big sign as well. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, it just depends, man. They could just feed off each other and both go up, but it's got to be one or the other at the end of the day. I like Herbie's price too, 630. It's not too
Yeah,
bad.
well,
It's
we're
just
onto
low
him
enough,
now.
but yeah, it's just the Azarko play. We'll just stay on that for a second. It's like 9% ownership's a lot. You're going off what he did last year, and that's it. Expecting him to do it again, so I can sort of see why people will be getting onto it because he was the second highest point scorer last season. He did it all the time. It's surprising as well. Like there were so many rounds where you almost want to discount it and write it off because you just don't think he's going to get it. And then he'll come out and just do something insane. He scored 100 against Melbourne. Scored 114 against the Warriors, and obviously it came. The Panthers game. You can look at that as a reality check. 35. So it's going to happen at some point, but it seemed like he was just all over the shop last year. So I just think too early to go for a near max price center wing with only about a year's worth of stats to look back on when you're going back to it. But yeah, don't be too surprised if it comes out round one. He scored 150 points, and then you just go, yeah, of course he did. Of course. Why wouldn't you? So
I agree. Farnworth, you mentioned, was next. 5% ownership, 632K. Very, very excited about this signing. I'd have him personally at the moment ranked as my number one center in the competition. especially when it's based off form. I think he was an absolute star for the Broncos last year. Um, for some reason, though, I'm just not tempted by him yet because I think for me anyway, how I'm setting my team up, I want one player around this sort of price tag in my backs to start with. Uh, and I've got the guy who's just under that in this team as my guy for that. And I'll explain why for the next one. I've been all over the hammer from the day this opened. But Herbie, like I can understand the 5% there. I'm actually surprised it's him and Nasako's numbers aren't reversed, to be honest. I thought it'd be up around the
Hmm.
9%, especially with the excitement factor as well. Maybe it's just people are scared off because it's the center. If he was given his fullback or something, I think that would go up to like 20%. Yeah, I know it's just something with about Farmers. Like I cannot wait to watch him in the rugby league. I can't wait to watch him at the NRL side of things. But for Supercoach, like it's just not. He's not grabbing me.
I'm a fan of him. I think he's going to have a really good season anyway, and I feel like he just doesn't have a bad game. You know what I mean? Like he's got a very,
Mm,
very consistent stat level. You look at him, and basically every game is going to be around that 60 mark. So he'll get there, and he'll have those massive games too. I just don't ever see him doing really bad. He just doesn't seem like that kind of guy that's going to give you a shit game. So um, the early buy might be the turn off. I could expect that number to be higher if they didn't have that early buy because you look around at Dom Young's just the next stat above him, and he's 8% owned. Like I see the appeal with him anyway. Roosters is a whole different thing, but Stephen Crichton 5% owned too. I would much rather Herbie Farnworth than Stephen Crichton to start the season. So um, yeah, I don't know, man. It just doesn't seem like it doesn't look like an exciting pick on paper. You see a Dolphins, Herbie Farmworth, whatever, so much. But I think he's one of the best centers in the comp. And
yeah, definitely.
I feel like just playing next to Azarko is going to naturally get that ball over his side a little bit more. And, obviously you've got O'Sullivan going that side too. So I feel like that little group could be a really nice little handy pickup for points there. But um, I wouldn't mind starting with Herbie, to be fair, man. I've had him in a fair few teams around because you want to have someone in that 600s. It's just too hard not to get a premium and then have to try and work around it. But then again, like the cash is spread out so fine, you can barely do anything with it. Um, but there's a
I think he's a
few
draft option, a
draft
sneaky
option.
draft option down the line. I think he's
Yeah,
going to go quite late.
yeah. Just depends on how
So our
fast you want
draft
to
boys
stack your.
listening, don't touch him.
Yeah, first rounder. It just depends on how fast people want to fill their center wings up. Because yeah, he'd be a great draft pick, man. You're going to get a very, very solid point score out of him every single week, and I don't feel like you could probably rely on him too, to get you that 50, 60 at the very least, and that's a good thing. Um, but hopefully more, potentially more anyway. But yeah, I'm on for Herbie. I think if you got Herbie in your team, you stick with it and you're happy with it. And you just make sure you've got someone to cover him in round 3 that's not Bostock, because he seems like he's a good value too. But that's the thing, you could lose both.
Yeah. Look, I mentioned him already. MSO Tabuai Fido, aka the Hammer, 600.9k, center wing and fullback dual, 10% ownership. I am one of those 10%, and I've been in that 10% since day dot of 2024 Supercoach. I'm all over him. Look, there's no Supercoach way to say it. It's a gut. It's my gut
Yeah,
feel for the Hammer. Here's my gut feel of 2024 that I will not start this year without him. I know there's the early buy to contend with. I'm happy to ride the wave with that. I just see Hammer this year with the amount of spark and talent in this back line being that player where back on the inside, it's the Hammer every time. It's just draw the fullback, pop it to the Hammer, off he goes, and you're not going to catch him. He scores the try. So I just no one can say a thing to get me away from the Hammer. I know that he's not the fancy option. I know he's not the best option out there. I just think, especially early on, I can see him getting me some cash, get me some good points, and possibly being the difference. Because even at 10% so far, I think he's yeah, he's obviously not as high up owned as some teams, and I love you, Hammer. He's my boy this year.
Do you hear that, Hamaso? He's your biggest fan. I don't see him making cash. That's one thing I'll probably say there. I reckon he goes down in price. I think he's a very try dependent sort of fullback, and if he doesn't get any attacking stats, he's going to score you 30. With attacking stats, he'll get you the 60 that he's priced at, and occasionally a
He's
couple
getting me
more. But
hundreds.
yeah, I think he only got 100 once last year.
We're not living
Yeah,
in the past year, mate.
no, I know. No, you got to look forward.
2024 year of the Finn.
That's right. Yeah, they're going to be a better team anyway too. Like it's you got to get past that first season, and they're very impressive for a first season too. So you just naturally expect them to do a bit more. So yeah, I expect I expect the same out of Hammer. I expect more out of some others, but I just feel like you're sort of going to get the same out of him, and it's not a bad same. It's just you're just going to have to bank on those tries, and there's a good chance he
Don't forget
does
as well,
something.
last year was his first full year at fullback.
Yeah.
He was not a fullback. He was a winger before that, and he was touted to be a center. He obviously
Mm.
plays center for the Maroons. That's big. Obviously, he didn't end up finishing the year at fullback. I think Wayne Bennett kept toying with him at center for the last few games to maybe just ease him out of the year because they were out of the finals race. But yeah, I love to have a couple of fullbacks when I can in that center position as well. That's always been a go-to play for me. So yeah, I know
Yeah.
you can say all what you want, Jesse,
No,
but
it's no fair
I'm
enough. But
hammer,
I
hammer,
can see
hammer.
why his ownership's double what Herbie's is, and it's because he's
Oh
the
yes,
fullback. You know what I mean? He's the
yeah.
fullback against the center, and you're always going to back the fullback to score more than a center will. But I just feel like, yeah, when it comes to the game side of things, we'll just have to see how that new backline goes, man, because it's almost entirely different. Um, they're going to put Bostock out on the wing. You're going to have Averillo inside him, and that Bostock thing might not stick either. It could be back to Tessie New, but who knows? And then you're going to have Herbie and then Azarko down the other end. So he's got talent literally either way. He can go left or right. He's going to have some outlet there for him. So, you could say it goes up too. I don't see his value really spiking too much higher. Um, it just really have to see how the team kicks off and starts performing with these new guys in there because, um, the Jewel is nice. His price 600. As far as the other 600Kers go, you'd be pretty happy to play him every week. But I just think you're going to get that exact thing out of him. So there's not much to deviate. But if you love him, man, and you're all over him, help yourself. Get him. Get two of him.
Thank you.
That's all
It's
right.
like an all-you-can-eat buffet. I'll be
Yeah.
going
All you
all
can
in
eat.
with the hammer. You and Aiken next for 579, 0% ownership. I can totally understand that.
Yeah.
Valence Tafare, obviously got sent to shamefully sent off to fat camp by Wayne Bennett. Come back and he does look fit. I'll give him credit. But just with the signings at the moment, I'm not sure where he fits in, especially early on with a starting spot. I've even heard rumors that he could be like a impact forward sort of thing off the bench. I'm not too sure, but even that, I can't see him getting points that warrants that 499K. So at the moment, for me, I think 1% is too much. Then that's where he's sitting at with the ownership percentage. The next player though does tempt me. I don't know why, but just recently, Jake Averillo, center wing / fullback dual, 488K. There's 9% ownership for him at the moment. So there is some, I think it's because the price tag is almost 200K cheaper than, say, Farnworth and the like. And he's a sneaky signing, as I've just said before, when it comes to the Dolphins and an overall NRL signing for this year. I really do like this signing. As I said, last day or two, I'm starting to get a little bit tempted by Averillo.
Yeah. No,
I don't even know why.
I don't hate it, man. It's not a bad price
Yeah.
too, and that's the thing. Like you look down in the sub 500 center wings, and there's not a great deal to pick from, especially none that are going to get out there and actually even play the game, let alone score well.
I
He's
think he's a
been
good
very,
early
very,
play.
yeah,
And
I think
because
so.
of their draw, to then go
Yeah,
up to one of those big level players, that gap, as we've talked about in the past, will smaller or become smaller. And you can go like your Averillo up to, say, your Marzu or something for only 150 or something, hopefully. So
Hopefully, it's a big gap to close at the moment. You're talking
Yeah.
almost 300 off that move, but he could. I don't really know, to be fair, man. I don't really know what his upside's going to look like. He's been very, very hot and cold for a long time, but you can also put that down to where he was playing, and even the position he was playing. It's been chopped and changed so much with him, going from centers or in the back line into a fullback spot, or like he's just been everywhere. So I feel like a move under Bennett, a bit more consistency, a bit more, this is going to be your role and this is what you're going to do, might actually suit him really well. Because you saw those games that he had last year where he did really, really well. And he strung a few of them together too, like high 70s pluses. And then obviously he'd come back and he'd shit the bed completely and score like 20 points. And you're thinking, how do you bank on that? Like you're going to get 80 or 20. Like that swing's so far apart. It's not a Herbie, you know what I mean? Where Herbie's going to do 60, 60, 60, and then an 80. This guy's going to give you the ups and the downs and really, really low downs, but different team, more downs with that team. So um, it's a pretty decent little pick if you've got the players for it. But again, like as far as Dolphins players go, I don't really have him in the top five. And
No,
if
no.
if I was going to play him, he would have to be after you're getting through the line. And there's a couple others that I would prefer, and you don't want to get caught up having too many because of the early buy again. So maybe down the line, he's worth a look in. And if he looks really impressive, and the Dolphins pick their feet up and they start to see a bit of consistency, and you're thinking, okay, they've got something going on here. Yeah, it might even be worth just moving that trade over. But 488 is not cheap. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's not like he's 300K and you can throw him in there. Like you're putting him at 488, he's probably the second or third center in your starting lineup at that price. So you got to be pretty
There's a
confident
guy
about it.
called Taylor May that's similar, that is
Well,
a must.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
um, Tessie New or Tessie New, as he likes to be called now, 470K, 0%. Understand why? No, thank you. Edric Lee is still going. Shout out to Big Edric,
Jesus. Chipping away.
0% ownership. I thought he actually went to Super League, but he hasn't. Next one, I know you've started to be hot on this guy, and I think there's been some news recently around him potentially being a starter in this back line. I don't think New did enough last year to warrant getting an automatic selection. So there's definitely that wing spot available. Jack Bostock, 19%, 314.5K. So he's not bottom dollar, but I think he's cheap enough to make work if he does get that starting wing spot. Points per minute at the moment is a slight concern for me, 0.5 points per minute. But hey, if he gets that starting wing spot, I think that'll go up. The points per minute will go up. I like the play, but again, it's a big if. It's a watch.
Mm.
It's a wait for Team List Tuesday, and if he's there round one, we obviously all jump on.
Yeah, I think if he's named, you just get him. Obviously, you can't really look at his points per minute and his previous scores because he hasn't really got much reference to go off. So you're kind of
Yeah,
just running off the new prospect of him potentially being something good. But the guy's huge, man. He's like 2 meters tall. Um, he's got every chance to succeed in that team. There's all this opportunity there for him, and if he can make it stick, then for 315, it's like who else have you got? Really, like anyone below 315 or anyone below 300, there's no one that's nailed. There's no one that's certain. And I feel like if he at least just gets that spot there out of all the other guys that you got to contend with, he'll probably be the best one to pick out of. Um, and that's kind of the only reason is because there's no actual clear cut, solid, definite cheapies at center wing at the moment. And he looks like he will be. I've seen so many words coming out about him. Just he will be outside Averillo to start the season. That's pretty much black and white. So, if that's the case, and you come team list and he's exactly where everyone said he is, yeah, I just don't see any reason to not have him if you need that cheap center. And you can go down 60, 70K and get a non-playing center wing who looks like they might be well because they got really high ownership. But there's a good chance he makes 60, 70K in a week. He comes out with this negative 80 break even. You're thinking now everyone's want to get on him, and there's your trade where
yeah.
you sort of find it. But it's just a wait to see team list, man. That's kind of all it is with him. And if he's in there, I feel like I'm going to have him at that point. I don't think there's any reason not to.
No, I agree. The last position for the Dolphins was fullback. We've already covered all the players because they are dual as well. So um, that's pretty much it on the Dolphins. We've covered all the pending questions as well from viewers and the like. Again, pretty much the only cheapie we literally just spoke about him. Bostock, I think, is the ideal cheapie there for the Dolphins, but it's just about a wait and see
Mm,
for Team List Tuesday, and hopefully Mr. Wayne Bennett is nice to us
yeah.
and does provide that, because it's always nice to have a cheapy option for some of these teams that we think are going to be fighting for that sort of top 8 spot.
I feel like O'Sullivan could be called a cheapie too, considering the other
Yeah.
options at half. So outside of them, there's not a great deal. You know, you're looking after that Flegler, Avarillo. Like they've got so many options, man. They really do,
Mm.
and that's why you can't
And
really
in a
get called out
way,
having
yeah, in a way
six of
that
them.
I feel like if you're getting Bostock, if he does get named, O'Sullivan comes into it even more because, as you said, with the height factor, and we've
Yeah,
seen it with a couple of games he played last year, that crossfield kick is going to be done by O'Sullivan. So that's a try assist. So
yeah,
that's some
it's
points
quite an easy one.
for O'Sullivan. That could
So
be a decent little combination that we look out for there, which hasn't really been talked about, but that's definitely an option. So